Today, we're cracking open a document that's about 3,000 years old, but we're not going to treat it like some dusty religious text. Nope. We're looking at it as a practical, nuts and bolts blueprint for how you build a society from the ground up. We're talking about Exodus chapter 22.
So let's start with that huge question. I mean, really think about it. If you had to write the rule book for a brand new community, where would you even begin? You'd have to figure out how to protect people's stuff, right? How to handle it when people just can't get along? And, crucially, how to make sure you take care of the people who are most vulnerable. Well, this ancient text is a real-world attempt to answer those exact questions.
So we're going to approach this whole thing like we're looking at a series of case files. Because these laws aren't just abstract ideas, each one is a specific solution to a real problem that people were facing every single day.
All right, first up, property, the absolute bedrock of any economy. And when something gets stolen or wrecked, this legal code has a really interesting priority. It's not just about punishment. The number one goal is to restore balance, to make the person who was wronged whole again.
And the key concept here, the word you gotta know, is restitution. It's such a powerful idea. See, it's not just about paying back what you stole. It often means you have to pay back more than you took. That extra bit covers the trouble you caused. And it's also a pretty good reason not to steal in the first place. It's all about restoring justice, not just replacing an item.
Let's open our first case file, the stolen ox. Now, you have to understand, in this society, an ox wasn't just another farm animal. It was your tractor, it was your engine. Stealing someone's ox could literally ruin their entire livelihood.
And this is where that restitution principle gets real. If a thief steals an ox and then sells it or slaughters it, basically gets rid of the evidence, they don't just pay back one ox. They have to pay back 5. 5! Why so high? Well, you're not just replacing the animal. You're paying for the lost work, the crops that didn't get planted, and the sheer scale of the crime. The law makes the victim more than whole.
Now here's where things get really fascinating, because the law actually considers the context. So if a thief breaks into your house in the middle of the night, it's dark, it's chaotic, you're terrified. The law acknowledges that fear. It says if you defend yourself with lethal force, it's not considered murder. But if that same thief breaks in during broad daylight, the situation's totally different. You can see what's happening, you can assess the threat, and in that case, killing the thief is considered bloodshed. It's a surprisingly sophisticated view on self-defense.
And the law isn't just for criminals. It's for the rest of us too. It covers negligence, all the ways we can accidentally mess things up for our neighbors. Say your ox wanders into the next field and starts munching on their crops, you're responsible. You light a fire that gets out of control and burns their harvest, you've got to make it right. It creates a society where everyone's accountable, not just for what they do on purpose, but for their carelessness too.
This practical logic shows up everywhere, like what happens when you borrow your neighbor's donkey. Check out how smart this is. If you borrow the animal and the owner's not there, whatever happens is on you. You're fully responsible. But if the owner is with the animal when it gets hurt, they were there, they shared the risk, you're off the hook. And if you were renting the animal, that fee you paid basically works like an insurance premium. It's a really clever way to manage risk.
Okay, so we've seen how they protected property. Let's shift gears and look at the rules for how people actually treated each other. The laws for just plain living together.
Now here's a case file that can feel really alien to us today, but it was absolutely critical to their social fabric. This law deals with a man seducing an unmarried, unengaged woman. In their world, this created a major social and economic problem, so the man has a serious obligation. He has to pay her father the standard bride price and marry her. But look at this exception. The father can actually say no. He can refuse the marriage. But even if he does, the guy is still on the hook for the money. The law's main goal here is to enforce a very serious consequence for the man's actions.
This brings us to what might just be the most powerful and timeless part of this entire code. It carves out specific, really forceful protections for the most vulnerable people in society. It's often said you can judge a society by how it treats its weakest members. Well, this code takes that idea very seriously.
Just listen to this. The law doesn't just say, be nice to immigrants. It connects the command directly to their own history, their own trauma. It's a demand for empathy based on shared experience. It's basically saying, you of all people know what it's like to be the outsider, to be powerless, so don't you dare inflict that on someone else.
And the protection for widows and orphans? It gets even more intense. We're not talking about a fine or a slap on the wrist. This is a direct warning from God. The text says, if you harm them and they cry out for help, my anger will be aroused and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives will become widows and your children fatherless. I mean, that is a chillingly personal threat. It elevates this crime from a civil matter to a direct offense against the divine.
And then there's this one little rule that says so much about compassion. So you could take someone's cloak as collateral for a loan, but you had to give it back every single night. Why? Because for a poor person, that cloak wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was their blanket. It was their only protection from the cold. The law makes it crystal clear that basic human dignity is more important than a business contract.
All right, now we have to turn to the final section of the chapter, the laws of life and death. These define the absolute most serious crimes, the ones that were seen as an existential threat to the community itself.
So, the text lists 3 capital offenses here. From the perspective of this ancient society, these weren't just matters of personal choice. Sorcery was seen as trying to manipulate spiritual forces and subvert God's authority. Bestiality was a profound violation of the natural order. And sacrificing to other gods, that was the ultimate act of treason, a rejection of the very foundation of their nation. These acts were seen as so destructive, they had to be completely removed.
And finally, the chapter closes out with a few rules that are all about reinforcing the community's special identity as a holy people. These laws set up a clear structure of respect for God, for your leaders, and for the kind of ritual purity that made them different from all the nations around them. It was all about building a specific kind of orderly and reverent society.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? When you really dig into this ancient legal code, you don't just find a bunch of old rules. You find a society wrestling with huge, timeless questions of justice, responsibility, and compassion. It shows you that what a culture chooses to protect, what it decides to punish, and most importantly, who it chooses to defend, that reveals everything about what that society truly values. And that's a question that's just as relevant for us to ask today.